Kitty Burns sat deep in her recliner, the morning light catching the edge of an old photo album spread across her lap. Her fingers brushed over a photo, Layla, smiling wide beside Jackson Morgan, both of them barely out of high school. The colors had faded, but the moment hadn't. Regina shuffled into the room, half awake, holding a cup of coffee. "What are you looking at?" Kitty didn't take her eyes off the photo. "The future." Regina raised an eyebrow. "What?" "That's a photo of Layla and Jackson Morgan. We haven't seen or heard from him in years." Kitty glanced up, calm and deliberate. "Speak for yourself." Regina frowned. "Why are you looking at those pictures?" "Because Layla needs greatness in her life," Kitty said, closing the album gently like it held something sacred. "Mom, you're talking in codes again. She needs pure love, not someone she's settling for." Regina sighed. "This about Leon? He's a good man." "Yes, he is," Kitty said, voice steady. "But is he the right man?" Before Regina could answer, the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the room. A car had just pulled into the driveway. A moment later, a knock echoed at the door. Regina blinked at the clock. "Who's calling this early in the morning?" Kitty stood, smoothing her blouse with a satisfied grin. "My date to the pancake breakfast at the church." "A date?" Regina echoed, walking to the door, confused. She swung it open and gasped. "Jackson?" He stood there, older but unmistakably him, with that same half-smile. "Hey, Regina." She let out a surprised laugh and hugged him tightly. Kitty stood behind her, calm and proud, like she'd been expecting him all along. Kitty gave Regina a gentle nudge with her purse. "Move, girl. I'm ready to eat." Regina laughed and stepped aside as Kitty shuffled past her, still smiling like she had a secret. Jackson followed behind, a little unsure but intrigued by the morning's odd momentum. When they arrived at the church, the smell of maple syrup and fresh biscuits filled the air. Inside the fellowship hall, Layla stood near the front, arranging flower centerpieces on long tables. She wore a simple sundress, her hair pinned back, focus in her eyes. Then she looked up and froze. "Jackson?" she said, stunned. He barely had time to respond before she ran into his arms. She hugged him tightly, pressing her face against his shoulder like she didn't want to ever let go. People around them paused, watching, smiling. Kitty stood back and beamed, her arms crossed. "It's time to work my magic," she whispered to herself. The morning passed easily. They sat at one of the tables, catching up over pancakes and coffee like no time had passed at all. 7 years melted in minutes. Laughter returned naturally. No pressure, just comfort. As people began to leave, Jackson leaned over. "Hey, Layla, want to grab lunch next Saturday?" She smiled, that old spark flickering in her eyes. "I'd love to." Next weekend, they met at a quiet bistro downtown. The conversation flowed. Childhood memories, career wins, heartbreaks, healing. Layla talked about her role in advertising, creating campaigns that actually made people feel something. Jackson shared his work in cybersecurity tech, protecting what matters in a world that forgets privacy. "It feels good," Jackson said, "being with someone who doesn't treat me different because of money." Layla looked at him, soft and steady. "That's because we know where you come from, and your money isn't who you are." Layla and Leon had been dating for about a year, but even Kitty could see it wasn't the kind of relationship that filled a heart. They worked at the same advertising agency, technically colleagues, but rarely on the same schedule. Leon was always gone. He traveled constantly for the company, jumping between cities, pitches, and presentations. When he was in town, their time together felt more like checking a box than sharing a life. Kitty noticed the pattern. The forced dinners, the polite conversations, the lack of sparkle in Layla's eyes. It wasn't that Leon was a bad man. He was respectful, successful, and dependable. But there was no fire, no joy, no real presence. He was more of a concept in Layla's life than a partner. Kitty sat in her recliner more than once, worrying that her daughter was slowly talking herself into a future she didn't truly want. A comfortable life, maybe. A stable one, sure. But not one built on love. And that's what scared Kitty the most. She feared that if Leon proposed, if he offered Layla what looked like the next step, Layla would say yes out of habit, not happiness. She'd convince herself it was good enough, that it made sense, that this was what people did at her age. Kitty knew better. She'd seen what settling looked like in other people's lives, and she wasn't about to let it happen to her daughter. Especially not when she knew who still held her daughter's heart. Layla hadn't truly let anyone in since Jackson. Their bond had been rare, deep, sincere, and real. But after college, their careers split them in opposite directions, and like so many young couples with ambition, they lost track of each other. Still, Layla had never connected with anyone else the same way. What Layla didn't know was that Kitty had kept in touch with Jackson all these years, quietly, thoughtfully. She'd watched him grow into the kind of man any mother would be proud to know. Disciplined, humble, driven. His success in cybersecurity hadn't changed him. He still called to check in on Kitty. Still asked about Layla. Kitty had been more than a neighbor to Jackson when he was growing up. His mother died when he was just 2, and his father, though hardworking, leaned on Kitty's kindness to help raise him. She'd become the only real maternal figure in his life. Now, Kitty believed the time had come. Before Layla made a mistake she couldn't undo. Before she mistook comfort for love. It was time for old love to find its way back home. Leon came home early from his latest assignment, surprising Layla with a rare free weekend. She invited him to Sunday dinner at her mother's house, something he hadn't been around for in months. As they walked through the front door, the smell of roast and sweet potatoes filled the air. Kitty stood in the dining room, setting the last of the silverware. Layla smiled and stepped forward to help, but stopped short when Jackson walked out of the kitchen, holding a bowl of green beans in one hand and a basket of warm cornbread in the other. "Hey," Jackson said casually, but his eyes landed on Layla with warmth. Her face lit up. "Jackson?" she said, her voice catching a little. Leon noticed the shift instantly. That brightness in her eyes wasn't there when she greeted him. His jaw tightened slightly, but he stayed quiet. Jackson nodded at Leon politely. "You must be Leon. Good to meet you, man." "Same," Leon replied, extending a hand. "Didn't know you would be here." "I've been coming around lately," Jackson said, flashing a grin, helping Kitty here and there. Dinner moved along, but the energy was undeniable. Conversations circled around old memories, high school dances, block parties, and Layla and Jackson's college days. The photo album came out again, and everyone leaned in close, laughing and reminiscing. Everyone except Leon. He sat back, quiet, eyes flicking from Jackson to Layla as she laughed, as she softened in ways he hadn't seen in a long time. Kitty, from her spot at the head of the table, didn't miss the way Leon looked at them. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile faltered. She'd seen that look before. Someone realizing they might be the outsider in a room full of history. Later that evening, back at Layla's apartment, the tension that had quietly simmered during dinner finally came to a boil. Leon stood near the window, arms crossed. "What was that, Layla?" he asked, voice clipped. "You were giggling like a teenager, laughing at everything Jackson said." Layla, caught off guard, turned from the kitchen. "Excuse me?" "You don't act like that with me. I've never seen you like that. Ever." Layla leaned on the counter, eyes narrowing. "You don't seem to mind when I'm charming and upbeat with clients. You've praised me for it." "That's different," Leon snapped. "You don't have a history with our clients." Layla folded her arms. "I haven't seen or heard from Jackson in years. It was just good to see him again. That's all. He's family to my mom. He made time. That matters." Leon stepped forward. "Right, and since his company's so demanding, why haven't you pitched him? Land someone like Jackson and you're set. That could make your career." Layla's eyes hardened. "I'm not going to use him to push my career. I've always earned my way. That's how I was raised." Leon tilted his head. "So would you be upset if I asked him to meet? Just a conversation? A presentation, nothing serious." Layla stood up straighter. "No, don't do that. Jackson is my friend. We can't mix business like that." Leon let out a dry laugh. "He's not my friend." There was a long pause. Then Layla said, quiet but firm, "I think it's time for you to leave." Leon blinked. "What?" I need space, she said, standing her ground. Right now, I need to think. Alone. Leon grabbed his coat, silent. No argument, just the door closing behind him. And Layla exhaled. The next evening after work, Layla pulled into her mother's driveway, her mind still restless from the argument with Leon the night before. She found Kitty and Regina crouched in the front yard, elbow deep in flower beds, dirt on their gloves, laughter in their voices. Without a word, Layla grabbed a small shovel and knelt beside them. After a few quiet minutes, she finally asked, "So, how long have you and Jackson been keeping in touch?" Kitty didn't even look up. "We never stopped." Layla's eyes widened. "What?" "We talk at least twice a week," Kitty said casually, patting soil around a marigold. Layla dropped the trowel. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Kitty paused, then glanced over. "He still has the same number. You could have called him yourself. What Jackson and I have has nothing to do with you. He's like a son to me, and as a mother, it's my job to keep up with my children." Layla shook her head. "So why is he hanging around now?" Kitty gave her a sharp look. "His time's more flexible now, and he likes to spend it with his family." Regina chimed in, grinning. "Layla, it was like you two had never been apart? The way y'all were talking yesterday? Seamless." Kitty chuckled. Leon, though, looked like he was brewing hard. She and Regina burst into laughter. Layla frowned. "Well, he wasn't happy that Jackson and I are still friends, after all these years." Right then, Jackson's car pulled up. He stepped out, dressed sharp in a tailored suit. He smiled, walking toward them. "Need any help?" he asked. Layla laughed. "Not in that expensive suit." Jackson smirked. "I'm always prepared." He popped the trunk and pulled out a plain gray sweatsuit. Regina shook her head. "You're probably the only millionaire who still wears cheap jumpsuits." Jackson grinned, changing right there by the car. "Some things keep me grounded. And like Mom here." He leaned over and kissed Kitty on the cheek. "I can't let those corporate sharks eat me alive. I'll always remember where I came from." Kitty smiled warmly. "And I'll make sure of it." She and Regina went inside to start dinner, leaving Layla and Jackson outside. As he worked, they talked, picking up right where they left off. Layla's phone buzzed. "Leon." She looked at the screen, then turned it face down. That night, when Layla got home, Leon was waiting by her door. "Why are you here?" she asked, unlocking the door without inviting him in. "I missed you today. You didn't answer your phone." "That's because I told you I needed space," she said firmly. "We've gone days without talking or seeing each other, so why is today any different?" Leon's voice sharpened. "You know my work is important to me." "And I do know that," Layla said, stepping inside. "But I'm starting to realize that might be a real problem for me." Leon's face tightened. "Oh, so now it's a problem because Jackson's back? How convenient." Layla's voice rose, sharp with frustration. "Get out. You will not use him as an excuse for the hole in our relationship." Leon narrowed his eyes. "Where was that hole a few days ago?" Layla didn't flinch. "It's been there. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." "Fine," Leon snapped and stormed out. Layla stood alone in the silence that followed, breathing heavy, but finally clear. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm amber hue over the backyard. Kitty and Jackson sat side by side on the back patio, sipping iced tea. The air was calm, filled with the soft hum of crickets and the scent of fresh-cut grass. Kitty leaned back in her chair, eyeing Jackson over the rim of her glass. "So," she said, "now that we've got some real time to talk, tell me, why haven't you gotten serious with anyone?" Jackson chuckled, setting his glass down. "You sound like every auntie at a family cookout." Kitty gave him a look. "I'm not asking for them. I'm asking for me." He sighed, running a hand over his short beard. "Well, my work is demanding. Long hours, constant travel." Kitty waved a hand. "Now give me a real reason. There are plenty of women chasing after you. You're not hurting for options." Jackson smirked, then looked out at the yard. "I don't want just anyone. I need someone who challenges me. Someone who keeps me grounded. I haven't found her yet." Kitty raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you keep comparing them all to Layla." His smile faded. A flash crossed his face, something between guilt and longing. "Mom," he started, his voice low. We live different lives now. She has Leon. Kitty laughed lightly. Leon? That's settling, not living. You and Layla light up when you talk to each other. The whole room felt it. Jackson shook his head, trying to deflect. That's just because we haven't seen each other in a while. Kitty leaned forward. Close your eyes. He looked at her, suspicious but amused. Why? Just do it. Trust me. Jackson chuckled and closed his eyes. Now, Kitty said gently, her voice soft and slow. Picture yourself standing at the end of the aisle. It's your wedding day. You're waiting for your bride. The music starts. She's walking toward you. Your heart is racing. You know, in that moment, you're about to spend the rest of your life with the woman you love. Jackson sat still, eyes closed, his breath shallow. You've said your vows, Kitty continued. You've exchanged rings. Now it's time to lift the veil. Her face is just inches from yours. Tell me, Jackson, whose face do you see? There was a long pause. He finally exhaled, voice quiet. Layla? Kitty reached over and laid her hands gently on his. Then, son, you've got your answer. Go after your love before she convinces herself comfort is enough. Don't let her choose safe over real. She deserves more, and so do you. Jackson opened his eyes, staring ahead, but clearly seeing something far beyond the backyard, something he thought he'd left behind, but maybe, just maybe, had been waiting for him all along. A few days later, Jackson was sitting at his desk reviewing client files when his assistant poked her head in. There's a Leon Simmons here to see you. Says it's about a potential partnership. Jackson raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected that. Send him in, he said, leaning back in his chair. Leon walked into Jackson's office confidently, briefcase in hand. He shook Jackson's hand firmly and launched straight into his pitch. I've been following your company's growth. The cybersecurity market is expanding fast, but I believe I can help you scale even further into untapped markets. I've put together a strategy for brand partnerships, media alignment, and global positioning, Leon said as he slid a folder across the table. Jackson flipped through it, nodding slowly, though his expression stayed unreadable. Did Layla know you were coming here? Leon looked up, unbothered. No, she'd never agreed to do business with a friend. Jackson's eyes narrowed slightly. So I guess we're not friends? Leon gave a shrug. We just met. We don't really have a personal connection. Jackson closed the folder and gave a polite smile. I appreciate you stopping by. I'll review the proposal and get back to you. That evening, Jackson called Layla. Hey, he said after she answered. Just out of curiosity, why didn't you come to me instead of Leon? If you ever wanted help with your career, I'd be more than willing. You know that. Layla sighed on the other end of the line. Because I don't want to use you, Jackson. I've worked hard to earn everything I have. I don't want anyone thinking I got ahead because I know someone with money or influence. I want my work to speak for itself. Jackson's voice softened. I understand that. I do. But I want you to know, I'd do anything for you. You're more than just a friend. You're family. After the call, Layla couldn't shake the weight in her chest. She picked up the phone and called Leon. Can you come over? She asked. Leon arrived about 30 minutes later, still in his work clothes, confident, maybe too much so. Layla snapped. Didn't I say not to see Jackson? Leon wasted no time getting straight to the point. You know, Layla, he said, you were a fool not to go to Jackson for help. Do you have any idea how many doors he could open for you? Layla's expression darkened. You don't get it. This is why things are not working. You don't respect me. Leon scoffed. This is about business, about pushing our careers forward. And that's all it's ever been to you. Career first. That's why you're always gone. I blamed myself for that. I thought I was being too needy, too demanding, but now I see I was just putting up with being your second priority. Leon's face stiffened. So this is it? Layla nodded. Yeah, it's over. Without another word, Leon turned and walked out, leaving behind the cold echo of his ambition. Later that night, Layla drove to her mom's house. When she walked in, Kitty and Regina were sitting in the living room watching old reruns. Layla didn't say a word at first. She just walked over to her mother and fell into her arms. He's gone, she whispered. I broke up with him. Kitty wrapped her arms tightly around her daughter, holding her like she did when she was little, and scraped her knee. Good, she said softly. You don't need to spend another minute with someone who doesn't see you. Regina came back with a tub of ice cream and 3 spoons. We're doing this the old-fashioned way, she said. They curled up on the couch, Layla, Kitty, and Regina, eating ice cream, laughing through tears, and letting years of bottled-up emotion melt away. For the first time in a long time, Layla felt like she was home. Not just in place, but in peace. A few days later, Jackson sat at his desk, the folder Leon had left still sitting in the corner, neatly reviewed and annotated. He picked up the phone and dialed. Leon, hey, I looked over your proposal, Jackson said, his tone calm but clear. Some solid ideas in there. I'd like to move forward with a meeting. Could you bring Layla with you? There was a pause on the other end. Leon cleared his throat. I don't think that would be a good idea. Jackson's brow furrowed. Why not? Leon exhaled. Because Layla and I aren't involved anymore. Things ended, and having her there would just make it uncomfortable. Jackson was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know. It's fine, Leon said quickly. Business is still business. Understood, Jackson replied. You're still welcome to present to the marketing department. They're waiting on your call. Thanks, Leon said, a bit more flatly now. After the call ended, Jackson leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he picked up his phone again and dialed a different number, one he knew by heart. Kitty answered on the second ring. Hey, baby. Hey, Mom, Jackson said with a smile in his voice. So, they broke up? Kitty couldn't help but smile. Yes, they did. A long time coming. Jackson chuckled. Okay, real question. How long do I need to wait before asking her out to dinner? Kitty didn't hesitate. You don't need to wait. Be here tonight. Jackson laughed. I love you, Mom. I will be there at 7. That evening, Jackson stood in front of Kitty's house, bouquet of sunflowers in hand, Layla's favorite. The nerves were there, but so was the hope. Not just for a date, but for something that had never truly gone away. Jackson stepped inside the house, the warm scent of dinner still hanging in the air. He leaned down and kissed Kitty on the cheek. Hi, Mom, how was your day? Kitty smiled wide, patting his arm. It just got better now that you're here. Jackson laughed. Flattery gets you everything. It sure does, she said, grinning. Just then, Layla walked into the room. She froze when she saw the bouquet of sunflowers on the counter. Her eyes softened and something in her chest loosened. You remembered my favorite flowers? She said quietly, walking toward them. Of course, Jackson said. They've always been your favorite. Layla took the flowers gently into her hands. I can't believe you'd remember. Jackson looked at her, his voice tender. I remember everything about us. She gave him a look, guarded but warm. So you heard about the breakup? He nodded. Yeah, thought the flowers might help at least a little. Layla gave a small smile and turned to put them in a vase. She didn't say more, but her silence wasn't cold. It was thoughtful. Kitty, never one to waste a good moment, chimed in. So the community center is hosting a dance next Saturday. It's a fundraiser for the kids' summer program. I think it'd be a good idea for you two to go. Jackson raised an eyebrow. You want me to ask Layla to a dance? Ask her to be your plus one, Kitty said, waving a hand. Don't make it sound like a date. Keep it casual, fun, no pressure. That evening after dinner, Layla and Jackson walked out together toward their cars. The air was cooler, the stars just starting to peek out. Hey, Jackson said, glancing at her. So about that dance, you feel like being my plus one? Layla looked over with a half smile. Why not take Mom? He chuckled. Mom's already got a date. Mrs. Harmon, you know her husband passed last year and she didn't want to go alone. Layla shook her head, laughing. Of course she's playing matchmaker. Maybe, Jackson said, holding the car door open for her. But even if she is, I'm not mad at it. Layla paused before getting in. All right, I'll go. But just as a friend. Jackson smiled. That's all I'm asking. But in his heart, he hoped it could become something more. Jackson pulled up in front of Kitty's house right on time. As soon as Layla stepped out the front door, his breath caught in his chest. She wore a soft blue dress that danced around her knees with every step, her curls pinned loosely, catching the porch light just right. "Wow," Jackson said, stunned. "You look gorgeous." Layla blushed, smoothing the fabric of her dress. "Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself." They smiled, their usual rhythm returning, easy and natural. When they arrived at the community center, the place was buzzing with laughter, music, and the hum of conversations. Paper lanterns lined the ceiling, and the space was filled with neighbors, friends, and local business owners showing their support. Before they could fully step inside, Kitty intercepted them, tugging Jackson aside with a suspiciously bright smile. "Jackson, baby, I forgot to mention something," she said sweetly. Jackson narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" "You're part of the fundraiser tonight?" "What do you mean, part of the fundraiser?" he asked, confused. Kitty patted his arm. "Just don't leave. We need you." Jackson's brows knitted. "Need me for what exactly?" Kitty only smiled. "Just wait and see." An hour later, the room lights dimmed and someone from the organizing committee stepped onto the stage, tapping the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," they announced, "tonight's big event, our community auction, has a very special prize, a dinner date with none other than Jackson Morgan." Cheers erupted across the room. Jackson's eyes widened, his mouth opening in protest. "What?" he muttered as Kitty grabbed him by the arm and pulled him toward the stage. "Mom, no, I'm not." "Shh," Kitty whispered. "It's for a good cause. Don't disappoint these women." Jackson stood under the spotlight, clearly embarrassed as a crowd of excited women surged forward, calling his name like he was a rock star. Layla stood near the back, shaking her head with a laugh, until Mrs. Harmon leaned in close and whispered, "You going to let those vipers outbid you, sweetheart?" Layla straightened, then raised her hand and joined the bidding war. 200, 450, 1,000. The crowd went wild. Layla kept pushing. 2,000. Finally, when it looked like another woman was about to win, Layla shouted over the crowd, $3,000. The room went silent for a beat. Kitty beamed. "Sold!" Applause broke out as Jackson looked out over the crowd, spotting Layla with a mix of shock and amusement. She smiled proudly, arms folded. Jackson laughed, finally relaxing. "Guess I owe you dinner." Jackson pulled up in front of Layla's house, the night air calm and quiet around them. As he put the car in park, he glanced over at her with a smirk. "I owe you a huge favor," he said, "and I think we both owe Mom a long talk." Layla laughed. "A talk or an intervention?" Jackson grinned. "Both. But seriously, what night is good for our date?" Layla waved a hand. "That's not necessary. I only bid on you to save you." He chuckled. "Hard to believe you dropped $3,000 just because I needed saving. But thanks anyway." They both laughed. Jackson leaned back. "Still, a deal's a deal. You have to honor the sale. Mom's not going to let you live it down." Layla sighed playfully. "You're right. I'll text you later with a date and time." The next morning, Jackson called Kitty. "Mom? Why did you do that to me?" he asked, half laughing, half scolding. "I thought you loved me." "I do love you," Kitty said sweetly. "That's why you now have a date with Layla." Jackson paused. "Wait, was the auction even real?" Kitty burst out laughing. "Most of those women are married, baby. I came up with the whole idea just before you two walked in. Everyone thought it was hilarious, and they were eager to help." Jackson rubbed his forehead. "I can't believe you." "I can't believe Layla bid so high," Kitty added, her tone softening. "That girl still has feelings for you, Jackson. Don't blow this. Make that date count." Jackson smiled to himself. "You're a genius," Kitty chuckled. "I know. Now give me grandbabies before I'm too old to enjoy them." Jackson laughed. "You got a deal." The next weekend, just as the sun began to dip behind the skyline, Jackson pulled up to Layla's house. He stepped out, dressed in a sleek navy suit, and walked her to the car with a warm smile. Layla, in a simple yet elegant black dress, looked effortlessly beautiful. As they pulled into the valet of an upscale restaurant downtown, Layla turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Jackson, you don't have to impress me with all this." Jackson grinned, stepping around to open her door. If we're on a date, this is what you get. Layla laughed as she stepped out. But we're not on a date. Jackson shot her a look. According to the community center committee, it is. They were practically auctioning off my future. Layla shook her head, laughing. Mom just won't give up. She doesn't want us to be lonely, Jackson said as they walked inside. She's been trying to set me up for the past 2 years. Layla blinked, surprised. Really? I didn't know that. Jackson glanced at her, serious now. Yeah, but truth is, I think I'm ready to find the right person, someone to come home to. A house full of noise, a wife, kids, all of it. Layla's expression softened, caught off guard by his honesty. She had never pictured Jackson as the settle-down type, not because he was incapable, but because life had always pulled him in so many directions. Dinner was full of good food, familiar conversation, and genuine smiles. Afterward, they took a quiet walk in the nearby park. The path was lit by string lights and the occasional lamppost, the air cool and gentle. Their laughter echoed between the trees as they swapped stories and memories. Layla reached out instinctively, and her fingers found Jackson's. She wrapped her hand into his without thinking. It wasn't until Jackson gently raised her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that she realized what she'd done. Her breath caught. Neither of them spoke. They just kept walking, hand in hand. That night, as Layla lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind wouldn't slow down. The way Jackson looked at her, the warmth of his touch, the kiss on her hand, memories of who they were, and the reality of who they could be. All the feelings she thought she'd buried had come rushing back, and this time they felt like home. After church that Sunday, the congregation spilled into the courtyard, exchanging hugs and greetings beneath the warm afternoon sun. Layla walked beside her mother, quiet, her hands clasped in front of her. Kitty glanced over. "You're awfully quiet today, baby. Everything okay?" Layla hesitated. "I think I'm going to skip Sunday dinner today." Kitty stopped walking. "Skip dinner? Since when do you skip my cooking?" Layla looked down, fidgeting with her bracelet. "Because Jackson's going to be there, and I'm not ready to see him." Kitty's face softened with understanding. "Oh, so it's like that now?" Layla gave a small, conflicted nod. "It's just, after the other night, I don't know what to do with everything I'm feeling. I thought I had moved on, but being around him, it brought everything back, and it scares me." Kitty gently touched her daughter's arm. "Feelings that strong don't come back unless they were real to begin with. You needed to feel them again, Layla. Sometimes the heart needs a second chance to be heard." Layla sighed. "I just don't want to rush anything, or mess it up. I'm not ready to sit across the table from him like everything's normal." Kitty nodded with a knowing smile. "Okay, baby. Take your time, but don't take too long. Life doesn't always wait around while we sort our feelings out." Layla nodded, grateful for the space, but even more grateful for how well her mother always seemed to understand. Jackson sat at the dinner table, quietly pushing his food around his plate. The usual laughter and conversation that filled Kitty's house on Sundays felt thinner without Layla there. Her absence echoed more loudly than any words. Kitty finally broke the silence. "She just needs time, Jackson. Layla's working through her feelings." Jackson glanced up, trying to mask his disappointment. "She was with Leon for a year," Kitty continued gently. "That's not nothing. She doesn't trust what she's feeling right now. Not completely." Jackson nodded slowly, but didn't say much else during dinner. The emptiness in Layla's chair was more than he could take. Later, after kissing Kitty goodnight, Jackson headed home. The second he stepped inside his place, he tossed his keys on the counter and started pacing. He had already sent Layla a couple of text messages earlier that afternoon, but she hadn't responded. Each moment of silence twisted deeper under his skin. Finally, he picked up his phone and typed out another message. "I need to talk to you. Please." He stared at the screen, waiting. Still nothing. Frustrated and fed up, Jackson grabbed his jacket and headed to her place. When Layla opened the door, surprise flashed in her eyes. "Jackson, what are you doing here? Why are you avoiding me?" he asked, voice steady but firm. Layla looked down. I just needed space, time to think. No, Jackson said, stepping inside. You don't need space. You need time to talk yourself out of what you're feeling, and I'm not letting you do that. I'm still in love with you, he spoke, barely above a whisper, and I'm not letting go this time. I'm ready for us to be a couple again. For life. Jackson stepped closer. Then what's stopping you? I just broke up with Leon, she said. It feels soon, and I'm not sure I'm good enough for you anymore. We've both changed so much. I don't know if I can make you happy. Jackson reached out and gently tilted her chin toward him. Look me in the eye and tell me you were in love with him. Layla hesitated. No, she whispered. I wasn't. Then what's holding you back from this? From us? Tears welled in her eyes again, but before she could answer, Jackson kissed her. She leaned into it, melting into the warmth, her doubts slipping away with every second. When he pulled back, his voice was soft but certain. That kiss came from someone who wants this as much as I do. Stop second-guessing us, Layla. She nodded slowly, her hand still in his. Okay, no more running. Jackson reached into his coat pocket, his heart pounding, his eyes never leaving Layla's. He pulled out a small velvet box, opened it, and gently took out a beautiful diamond ring that sparkled even in the dim light of her living room. He slipped it onto her finger with slow, careful intent. Layla gasped, eyes wide. Jackson? What are you doing? He held her hand tightly, his voice steady. I'm claiming my wife. Layla blinked, completely caught off guard. You're not gonna ask me first. No, I'm not. I've waited long enough. I've loved you for years, Layla. And I'm not gonna let fear, timing, or anything else get in the way now. You are my wife. She stared at the ring, then back at him, tears beginning to form. But this is so fast, Jackson, Jackson leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. We've already lost time. I don't want to lose another day pretending we're not meant to be. This isn't about rushing, it's about finally saying yes to something we've both known all along. Layla swallowed hard, her heart racing as she looked down at the ring, his hands still wrapped around hers like a promise. Then she smiled through the tears. Okay, yes. Jackson grinned, pulled her into his arms and whispered, That's all I needed to hear. The next evening, Layla and Jackson pulled into Kitty's driveway, their hands still intertwined, hearts beating in sync. When they stepped inside, Kitty and Regina were curled up on the couch watching one of their favorite dramas. We've got something to tell you, Layla said, trying and failing to hide the excitement in her voice. Jackson lifted her hand, proudly showing off the diamond ring now resting on her finger. Kitty gasped, jumping to her feet. Oh my lord, my babies. She wrapped them both in a tight hug, tears streaming down her cheeks. You finally found your way back to each other. Regina wiped a tear, already smiling. It's about time. Have y'all thought about a date yet? Layla shook her head. No, not yet. Yes, Jackson said, interrupting. How about after service this coming Sunday? Layla turned to him, eyes wide. What? Jackson grinned. Just about everyone who means anything to us will already be there. I'm ready, Layla. Waiting another day aches my heart. He dropped to one knee again, right there in Kitty's living room. Layla, will you marry me this Sunday? Layla laughed through her tears, covering her face before nodding. Yes, I will. Kitty squealed, practically bouncing as she grabbed the phone. I'm calling Pastor right now. Word spread quickly, and by Sunday morning, the entire church community had transformed the sanctuary at Kitty's request. Soft ivory and gold drapery flowed along the pews, flowers lined the altar, and candles flickered with warmth and joy. The service that day was short and sweet. Everyone knew the real celebration was just beginning. Layla walked down the aisle in a beautiful ivory gown, her hair pinned back, simple pearl earrings and necklace catching the light. Jackson stood at the front, eyes locked on her, holding back emotion as the music played. When they kissed, it lingered, gentle, real, and filled with years of untold stories. Church erupted in cheers, but Layla and Jackson didn't hear a single word. In that moment, it was just the two of them. The couple were escorted to the fellowship hall, where the community had outdone themselves. The decorations were breathtaking: soft lights, cascading linens, handcrafted centerpieces, and warmth that rivaled the finest designer event. But what made it perfect was love. Real, patient, fought-for love. After returning from their honeymoon, life quickly began to settle into a new rhythm for Layla and Jackson. Layla was offered a position on the company's marketing team, a well-deserved step up and a clear sign that her hard work was being recognized. The newlyweds were still working out the balance of living arrangements, merging lives, routines, and closet space, but it was filled with laughter and love. Then, one quiet morning, Layla stood alone in the bathroom, staring down at the pregnancy test in her hand. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught, and her heart started racing. She sat on the edge of the tub, stunned, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. That night, when Jackson walked through the door, tossing his keys onto the counter, he could tell something was different. "I finally went to the doctor," Layla said, walking toward him. Jackson furrowed his brow. "Yeah? What did they say?" "Well," she started slowly, "I need to change my diet plan, get more rest, and maybe make a few lifestyle changes." Jackson's face turned serious. "Why? Did she say something was wrong?" Layla reached for his hand and gently placed it on her stomach. "Because we're having a baby, Jackson." His eyes widened, stunned, silent for a moment, before breaking into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. Without hesitation, he scooped her up and spun her around the room. Laughing, then, still holding her close, he pulled out his phone and called Kitty. The moment she answered, he practically shouted, "Mom, you're going to be a grandma." Layla laughed through happy tears as Jackson kissed her forehead, both of them already picturing their next chapter, one filled with tiny footsteps and even bigger love. Months later, the moment finally came. It was time for their son to enter the world. Layla's labor was long and exhausting, stretching through the night and into the next day. But Jackson never left her side. Not for a second. He held her hand, whispered encouragement, and wiped away her tears when the pain overwhelmed her. Kitty stood on the other side, strong and calm, the rock they both needed. She rubbed Layla's back between contractions, whispered prayers, and reminded her over and over, "You've got this, baby." Finally, after hours of labor pain, cries filled the room, and so did tears. Little Thomas Morgan arrived healthy and full of life. The moment Layla held him, everything else faded away. Jackson leaned in, kissing her forehead, whispering, "You did it. He's perfect." Kitty didn't waste any time embracing her new role as full-time grandma. While Layla and Jackson returned to work, she took care of Thomas with the same love and devotion she'd always given her own children. Her days were now filled with bottles, lullabies, and baby giggles, and she wouldn't have it any other way. On Thomas's first birthday, the family gathered in the backyard, balloons tied to chairs, a tiny cake with blue frosting waiting on the table. As Layla helped Thomas poke at his smash cake, Jackson grinned, watching them with pride. He leaned in and whispered, "So, I think I'm ready for number 2. Layla shot him a sharp look, eyes wide. "Excuse me?" Kitty, sitting nearby, leaned over with a wink. "Don't worry, I got this." Jackson laughed and kissed her on the cheek. "That's why I love you so much, Mom." Layla just shook her head, smiling despite herself, because deep down, she knew their story was still just beginning. Hope you enjoyed this love story by Green Tea Tale. Help our channel to grow by like, share, comments, and subscribe.